we have two separate governments. We have the one that actually gets elected and goes into office, and then you have a government inside of Washington, D.C. that operates under no rules, no authorities other than their own or who's ever in charge of their
Sounds like that government was still controlled by Barack Obama.
Yeah, and I would say that to a degree is what we're operating with today. So when people talk about the deep state, and I've heard a lot of people talk about the deep state and the deep state this, the deep state that. The deep state, I don't really describe the deep state as a group of politically, of Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or some of the people that are elected. They become part of it, but they're not really the deep state. The deep state in this country are the bureaucrats and particularly the organizations that run the security apparatus. So when Eisenhower used to talk about, and he warned us, I think in his final speech when he was departing as the president, he warned us about the military-industrial complex, and that was back in 1960. So when Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex, if you fast forward to today, 2021, you can add a component to that, and the component that I would add is the security state component to the military-industrial complex, because the security state of this country has grown probably by 5 times in the last 25 to 30 years. So when I think about, and I'll just use, I'll use the Defense Intelligence Agency to give some people perspective. In the early 2000s, so prior to 9/11, DIA was around 3,000 people. When I took it over in only about 10, 11 years later, in 2012, I took it over, it was upwards of close to 20,000 people. So it had 17,000 employees, and then we had about another 3,000 or 4,000 contractors in various shapes and forms. So in a 10-year period of time, and it really was 9/11 probably was the impetus behind some of this, but I think what happened was over time, this security state complex really joined with this military-industrial complex that Eisenhower talked about. And the dangers now that we face is we have that security state complex are all of these intelligence community agencies and activities that we have, right, that we've heard so much about, 16, 17, whatever you want that number to be today. And then who actually is in charge of them, and then what authorities or what things that they're able to do. I mean, you know this, you've lived this by them monitoring your phone calls, right? And you talked about this only a few months ago where it was like, if they can do, I mean, they were monitoring my phone calls with no warrant. They were just monitoring them because they could. And so when we talk about the deep state, it doesn't really even take somebody from the White House to say, go do it. Although in my case, somebody from the White House did actually direct it. And it's both in terms of a Barack Obama or a Joe Biden, because they had that infamous meeting on the, I think it was the 5th of January in 2017, where Biden talked about the Logan Act, which was another one of these crazy things, you know. And I know you've talked about that in time. So this deep state complex, the security state complex, is something that the American people are now just beginning to get a taste of.
Well, because we were assured, I mean, I grew up in Washington from when I was in high school. My dad worked for the government. I feel like I was sort of familiar with what the boundaries are supposed to be, and we were always told that the CIA in particular, which has been huge and well-funded for generations, it's, you know, even before 9/11, but they were not allowed to conduct surveillance activities in the United States, interfere in our political system. I mean, they were outward-facing, right?
Right.
So since you ran an intel agency, give us the unclassified view of what the CIA does exactly. How big is it? What kind of interference do you think they have internally?
Well, I would just tell you that the roles and responsibilities of these agencies, the CIA, DIA, National Security Agency up at Fort Meade, and then really the roles and responsibilities of the Director of National Intelligence, or what's called the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which includes the Counterterrorism Center, the Office of Counterintelligence. I mean, these are big structures, and they're unwieldy. And who's ever in charge of them, if they are, depending on their view, depending on their political views, and frankly, whatever administration is in charge, or whoever they're kowtowing to over in Congress for a particular budget item, because you're correct when you're talking about the extraordinary amounts of money that flow through Congress and flow into these intelligence agencies and the activities that they do around the world. So the big picture, the CIA is supposed to be international. FBI as a big organization is supposed to be domestic and taking care of all those things, and they're supposed to cooperate on different aspects of what's happening, from overseas to domestic issues, right? Like terrorists that are making phone calls to their buddies in Dallas, Texas, or Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or St. Louis, Missouri. They get picked up by the National Security Agency, the CIA's tracking them, and then they're talking to somebody inside the United States. The FBI is supposed to be a nice, clean handoff. So what has happened is that those lines no longer exist. They're not even blurred. They just don't exist. And so if there is a decision made, if there's a decision made about a particular interest that somebody has, politician might have, a leader of an agency or a bureau or the DNI themselves may have, they can direct somebody to, well, let's play this one out. You guys take this. They can direct the CIA to take it. They can direct the FBI to take it. They can direct damn near any agency or activity to take it. So that blurring of lines is gone. And I think with the advent of 9/11, and they took with all of the stuff that we learned about FISA, right? So remember the very famous abuse of the FISA court, right? They would go in there and first they would lie to the FISA court. That's egregious enough. But they would use these warrantless intercepts, and they would use those, and they would say, well, this is an international issue, so we're going to continue to listen. And then you would have these, what they would call hops off of a phone call. So I talk to you, you talk to your wife, she talks to her friend. And so they could target me, but they could listen to you, they could listen to your wife, and they could listen to the conversation she's having with her friend. And nobody would pay any attention. Somebody go, oh, hey, this is what we learned about Tucker Carlson. This is what we learned about something his wife is doing. So this is the kind of abuse that we are facing now. And so when I look at what we need to do as a nation, because we're going through this right now. I mean, the Department of Justice is a organization that is part of everything that I'm talking about. And when we talk about the CIA or DIA or the intel community or the Department of Defense and the military apparatus that we got, the industrial complex that we have of contractors, really living off the government, and in many cases we need them because they do build things that we do need. But all of this has grown into something that is really out of control, and we need to have a reckoning, I think, in our own system of government to say, what direction do we want to go?
Can I ask a question? So you said a second ago that the intel agencies and the Department of Justice are, by definition, dependent on the Congress for funding.
Right.
So they need the Congress because they don't exist without it. So if you're gathering massive amounts of intelligence domestically, if you're listening to people's phone calls and you know their secrets, it's got to be pretty tempting to say there's Congressman X who's the head of the committee, but it turns out he's doing something creepy in his personal life. Maybe we use that against him to make sure he's always on our side. Do you think that happens?
Yes. And so if you go back to, I think it was under John Brennan as the CIA director, where they caught them basically tapping into the
Senate,
in the Senate's computers. The other part of that is that if you look at the staffers, okay, so you have permanent staff and you have temporary staff that get hired when people come into Congress, and you get appointed to a particular committee, Appropriations Committee, or the House Intelligence Committee, or the Senate Intelligence Committee, or the Senate Appropriations Committee, or the Armed Services Committee, you name it, right? Those staff positions are critical positions for people in the CIA, people in other parts of the government, to make sure that they get their guy or their gal on that staff. because they control what gets written into a bill. These bills that are 2,000 pages, right? So they not only know what these politicians are up to in their personal lives, they also are controlling what gets put into these bills.
Come on. So you're describing an autonomous government within our government.
Yeah, that's why I say there's like two governments. We're dealing.
But you're not overstating it. I mean, if they're controlling their own funding, then I mean, like they exist outside the democratic process.
Right. That's right. And I'm not overstating it, and they know exactly what I'm talking about.
So that's why they wanted to crush you. So I wanted to play this. This is Comey, Jim Comey, who famously ran the FBI. This is him after leaving December of 2018, going on MSNBC, and kind of laughing about what they did to you. Here he is.
Look at this White House now, and it's hard to imagine two FBI agents ending up in the same room. How did that happen?
I sent them. Something I probably wouldn't have done or maybe gotten away with in a more organized investigation, a more organized administration. I thought it's early enough, let's just send a couple guys over. And so we placed a call to Flynn, said, hey, we're sending a couple guys over. Hope you'll talk to them. He said, sure. Nobody else was there. They interviewed him in a conference room at the White House Situation Room, and he lied to them. And that's what he's now pled guilty to.
What did he think they were coming over there for?
I don't think he knew. No, we didn't tell him.
So here you have all the dumb people at the 98th Street, whatever, some forum in New York City, laughing about the FBI director laughing about undermining democracy, the democracy they said they're defending. When you saw that, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, talk about, beyond irritated. That interview that Jim Comey did that day demonstrates the level of arrogance that oozes out of people like him, but also out of the organization that he led and the culture that exists, particularly in Washington, D.C., in the FBI, and in the Department of Justice. I mean, that sense of arrogance that we are above all of this, and we're not even going to follow the law. When he said an unorganized investigation, that's what he meant. And then he said an unorganized White House. He really meant an unorganized investigation. And what we learned over time was that the FBI, the couple of guys that came in to talk to me, they actually changed. So they said that we went in there. Flynn was candid. He was great. He didn't lie to us. And so they ended up changing the document that ended up going in front of the court. And so we know that today. So I always say I went through persecution for a lie that I didn't ever state and for a pardon that I didn't want.
You didn't want the pardon?
No, I didn't want it at all. I didn't want it because I didn't deserve it. It was one of these things where the Department of Justice, after a 6-month special counsel investigation led by a attorney that was brought in, an attorney general that was brought in from outside of Washington, D.C., after 6 months, he said, he basically recommended to dismiss my case for egregious government misconduct because they abused the entire system of law. And then, of course, I had to deal with a court or a judge for about another 6 months who was operating as though he was in the French system of government where he was going to be the jury, the judge and the executioner, and that lasted another 6 months.
Totally out of control. Judge Emmett Sullivan, I think.
Judge Sullivan, right.
So you spent your entire life in the Army in government service at this point.
Right.
So you didn't go to work. By the way, you got out of Defense Intelligence, 3-star general. You could have gone to work for Lockheed or done what everyone else did. You didn't. Yep. Which is the more noble path, I would say, but it's the less remunerative path. So you didn't have any money. How much do you think, in the end, you spent on legal defense?
I would say, I want to swear on your show because it was ass pain, but I will say that because it's more than the finances. But it's from my selling my home, going through the incredible levels of embarrassment that you do go through, the this humbling experience, but I was really strengthened by our faith. I mean, it's in the millions. It's definitely in the millions. It's so, you know, it ranges between $4 and $8 million that cost my family, and it's still costing my family. And
you're one of 9.
I'm one of 9 children.
So it's a huge family.
Yep.
How did they react?
My family grew stronger together, and we were really bonded over this because we have a very close-knit family. We grew up in a very small house. Both my parents are deceased now, but we were raised in a very tight-knit Irish Catholic family.
How big was your house?
Our house was a 3-bedroom house. It was very small. It was probably 1,300 square
feet.
With
11 people in it?
11 people in it, and a dog, and every so often a few cats. But
how many bathrooms?
1.
That's just an America that doesn't even exist.
Yeah, that doesn't. So our family grew stronger, all of my brothers and sisters, because we know each other intimately.
So all your siblings were on your side.
Yep. No, never wavered, never broke, never argued, never questioned. That they all knew from the beginning, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is unbelievable." But my family, especially my brothers and sisters, if you met them all, they are absolutely switched on to what's going on because the way we were raised. My mother was a lifelong learner. My father was a retired sergeant from the Army, and he was a treat others like you like to be treated. You're going to go work hard. But my mother was a terrific, smart person, and she was heavily involved in politics, local politics. I mean, we grew up as Democrats in Rhode Island, state of Rhode Island. So my mother was involved in state politics. She was the Right to Life coordinator for the state of Rhode Island.
As a Democrat?
As a Democrat. So we were always involved. We were always switched on to what was happening. And we've had siblings in the military. I'm one. My brother Charlie's one. My brother Billy is retired military. I have had sisters who were married to Marines and Navy folk. So service and the country has been our life. And so in all this, when Mike gets involved with Trump, then Trump suddenly wins. It's like, wow, this is a great thing. This is really, they were very appreciative that I was involved because they knew, for me, it was never about Donald Trump. And that's what people fail to see. That's what the left fails to see. They made this about a man and not the country. The American people, Tucker, they see this as the country and not the man. And that's what the left refuses to continue to see. So they keep beating on people as though they're the problem, when the real problem is the ideology that they are coming at us with right now, which is a really dangerous ideology.